So imagine this. You're a YouTuber who makes videos talking about the most underrated game of each year. But now, you're fucked. Cause now you're gonna have to figure out what the most underrated game of 2018 is. A year so stacked with legendary games, it can almost compete with your mom. Sorry, that was cheap. Anyway, so you start researching. Maybe it could be Far Cry 5. On second thought, no. That's too well known, and that's 2 Ubisoft games in a row. You even find some fucked up game like this. But then, you stumble upon a game that you completely forgot even came out in 2018. A game that sold millions, yet somehow disappeared from almost every conversation about one of gaming's greatest years. It was the end of a crazy trilogy. It was the conclusion to the story of an iconic character. It was the ending of the Tomb Raider reboot. So without talking too much, welcome to the 7th episode of Underrated. Let's see what we cooking. Before 2013, Tomb Raider had a problem. Lara Croft was one of the biggest icons in gaming during the late 90s and early 2000s. But the franchise gradually lost momentum. The biggest blow came with Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness. It launched in a rough state, was criticized heavily, and nearly killed the series. After that, developer Crystal Dynamics took over from the original studio. They released games like Tomb Raider Legend, Tomb Raider Anniversary, Tomb Raider Underworld. These games were generally well received, but didn't fully restore Tomb Raider to its former dominance. That's because games were changing. They weren't just gameplay loops stitched together anymore. Games like Assassin's Creed 2 and Batman Arkham Asylum showed gamers what cinematic storytelling in modern graphics looks like, and gamers absolutely loved it. So now, it was time for a change. To get Lara Croft her well-deserved fans back, the franchise needed a reboot. Tomb Raider 2013 was the product of this much-needed retelling. Instead of the legendary Lara Croft everyone knew, players were introduced to a much more grounded version. Someone who wasn't experienced enough to fight the unnatural and had to survive before she could become a hero. This changing character was the director's intention. They wanted every game in this trilogy to be set in a different stage of Lara's journey. She would go from the survivor to the explorer, and at last she would become the Tomb Raider. Now, I didn't know this before, but apparently the third game of this trilogy was made by a different studio. The first 2 games were handled by Crystal Dynamics, but as for the third game, it was made by Eidos Montreal. These guys are just in it to make underrated games, man. But why the change? Crystal Dynamics seem to be having a good run with their games. In fact, The Rise of the Tomb Raider is still considered the best game in the trilogy. So, why would they be out? Well, they weren't out. Square Enix needed them to work on something else, but didn't want to make the fans wait too long to conclude Lara's story, so they gave the game to Eidos Montreal, but had Crystal Dynamics helping in the process. You wanna know what game it was that was so important that Crystal had to work on? It was Marvel's Avengers. Yeah, that one. What a good trade-off we got, boys. Give it up. This change in studios was actually one of the reasons people think this last game ended up being the weakest in the trilogy. The 2 studios had different philosophies for what Tomb Raider should be. Crystal Dynamics focused more on action, gunfights, and cinematic set pieces. Eidos Montreal wanted to lean much more into exploration, puzzles, and, well, actual tomb raiding. And that's the interesting part. This game didn't become underrated because of terrible marketing. It didn't become underrated because it launched broken. It didn't even become underrated because of behind the scenes drama. Shadow of the Tomb Raider became underrated because it doubled down on exactly what a part of the fanbase had been asking for. It just turned out not every Tomb Raider fan wanted the same thing. Let me explain. Tomb Raider 2013 had a lot of action set pieces that made fans happy. But there was always one complaint. This is a Tomb Raider game. where are all the tombs? People wanted more exploration, more puzzles, more reasons to actually raid ancient ruins instead of constantly shooting mercenaries. So when Rise of the Tomb Raider came out, Crystal Dynamics found the sweet spot. There was enough action to keep things exciting, enough exploration to satisfy long-term fans. It's still considered by many to be the best game in the trilogy because it balanced both sides almost perfectly. But then came Shadow. Instead of keeping that balance, Eidos Montreal pushed the series even further towards exploration. The tombs became bigger, the puzzles became more creative, the exploration became much more rewarding, but there was a cost. The action took a back seat, and that's exactly what divided the fanbase. Some players absolutely loved this change. For them, this was finally the Tomb Raider game they'd been waiting for. Others felt like the pacing slowed down too much and there was just not enough action to keep things moving. Personally, I'm in the second group. To be honest, I don't really like these types of games. Spending 30 minutes solving puzzles just to grab an ancient artifact has never been my thing. The only game in this genre that genuinely hooked me was Uncharted. But let's be honest, Nathan Drake is carrying a lot of that experience. You just can't hate the guy. Even though Shadow didn't have the same impact on me, I still have to give credit where it's due. The tombs are incredibly well designed. Some of the puzzles are genuinely clever, and because the game isn't constantly throwing explosions at you, when an action set piece finally does happen, it feels like an event. If the game was blowing things up every 10 minutes, those moments wouldn't stand out nearly as much. They are rare, which is exactly why they leave such a strong impression. Now, enough history, let's actually talk about the game. To understand Shadow of the Tomb Raider though, we need to go back for a second. We have to talk about Trinity. Think of Trinity as this massive secret organization that's been pulling the strings behind the scenes for centuries. They're basically the Illuminati, except instead of controlling the world with money, they would rather go around stealing ancient artifacts capable of ending it. Their goal is actually simple: find powerful relics before anyone else does, use them to reshape humanity. Simple enough. Now, Shadow begins with Lara tracking Trinity all the way to Mexico. They've discovered an ancient Mayan temple, and inside that temple is an artifact called the Key of Shakshel. If I haven't fucked up the pronunciation actually. Now, here's the problem. An old mural literally tells Lara, maybe don't touch this. And what does she do? She touches it. Congrats, Lara. You had one fucking job. The moment she removes the artifact, a massive tsunami hits the city. Hundreds of people die. And Lara realizes she didn't stop Trinity. She actually helped start an apocalypse. Now, I really like this opening because for the first time in the trilogy, Lara isn't fixing somebody else's mistake. She's fixing her own. From here, the story becomes a race against Trinity to find another artifact known as the Silver Box before the world completely falls apart. This journey eventually leads her deep into the Peruvian jungle. After escaping the temple, Lara and Jonah continue chasing Trinity through the Peruvian jungle. And this is where you really start noticing how much Lara has changed. Back in the first game, every dangerous animal felt like a life or death situation. Now, she's hunting jaguars. And let me tell you, those things do not fuck around. That whole sequence is honestly one of my favorite parts of the early game. Not because it's some huge action scene, but because it quietly shows how far Lara has come. She isn't just surviving anymore. She's becoming exactly what the trilogy has been building towards. Right after that, the game introduces you to Petiti. This is where you'll spend most of your time. A hidden city that somehow managed to survive for centuries without the outside world finding it. It's easily one of the coolest locations in the trilogy, but it's also where the game's pacing slows down the most. You'll spend a lot more time talking to people, exploring, and solving puzzles rather than blowing things up. Gameplay-wise, Shadow is much slower than the previous games. You'll still fight Trinity soldiers, you'll still sneak through enemy camps, and yes, you'll still blow people up every now and then, but most of your time is spent exploring ancient ruins, swimming through caves, climbing cliffs, and solving environmental puzzles. Personally, that's where the game lost me a little. I've never been the biggest fan of puzzle-heavy games. If a game asks me to spend half an hour figuring out how to rotate 3 statues just so it can give me an ancient spoon from 2000 BC, I'm probably questioning my life choices. But if you're someone who enjoys exploration, you're gonna have a great time. The tombs are easily some of the best in the reboot trilogy. They're much bigger, they're more creative, and unlike a lot of games that throw puzzles in just because they can, most of these actually feel like they belong in the environment. Combat has also changed quite a bit. Instead of running into every fight with enough ammunition to invade a small country, Shadow encourages stealth. Lara can cover herself in mud and literally disappear into certain walls. She can hide in bushes, hang enemies from trees, or silently take them out before anyone even realizes she's there. It's honestly pretty badass. The game also gives you a surprising amount of freedom with outfits. Different outfits give Lara different perks depending on how you like to play. Some improve stealth, some help with crafting, others make exploration a little easier. Me personally, I chose the Craft Fitness outfit for no particular reason. Don't look at me like that, please. I know what I did, and I'm not proud. The game even lets you customize the difficulty in a pretty unique way. You can change combat, exploration, and puzzles separately, which honestly, more games should start doing. Patiti is where Lara discovers that Trinity's influence goes much deeper than she first imagined. The organization has already infiltrated the city, and they're only one step away from getting exactly what they came for. Lara manages to recover the artifact Trinity has been searching for, but in doing so, she unknowingly pushes the world one step closer to complete disaster. And from this point on, I'll let you experience the rest of the story for yourself. Trust me, it's worth seeing it without me ruining every single surprise. Square Enix was honestly fighting the impossible. Releasing a AAA game in 2018? Really? They got some balls at their headquarters. 2018 was one of the best years in gaming. Giants came out that year. Do I even need to name any? I will anyway. God of War 2018, Red Dead Redemption 2, Monster Hunter World, Marvel's Spider-Man. You get my point. It was impossible for this game to become a giant amongst those titles. Not that it failed, it actually sold millions. And over the years, the love for this game among gamers has only been growing. But it could have achieved even more had it not been released in that time. Now, let's get a little nerdy. This trilogy was made with the Foundation engine, the engine that was built by Crystal Dynamics, and it evolved throughout the trilogy. And it's the reason that this game still looks really good 8 years later. This engine is incredible when it comes to things like making high quality facial animations, realistic mud, detailed water simulation, dynamic weather, and etc. It was kinda built for Tomb Raider if you think about it. It is good in all the things these games have, and with a budget big enough for a AAA game, there is no surprise in seeing how good it looks and how well made it is. So, if you're someone who enjoys a good challenge with some occasional action that will hit you harder than your dad ever did, this is the game for you. Shadow of the Tomb Raider isn't underrated because everyone who criticized it was wrong. It's underrated because it committed to a design philosophy that naturally split its audience. If you wanted another Uncharted style adventure, this probably wasn't the game for you. But if you wanted to feel like an actual Tomb Raider, this might just be the closest the reboot trilogy ever got. So while it's not my cup of tea, I can see the value in it, and I absolutely do recommend playing it and experiencing this greatly designed world firsthand. And as much as I don't want to leave you guys so soon, this is all I could say for today. Subscribe to the channel for more content, and if you have any thoughts, I will be happy to hear them.
By taking the key, you set the apocalypse in motion.